Welcome to episode 69 of Communicast, a communication skills podcast. I'm Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond, a global communication skills training organization. Communication is the work. This is so true and something that is often overlooked by many business professionals. In this episode, I chat with Artem Koren, Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Sembly AI, a SaaS platform that helps to make meetings more effective. We discuss what he looks for in leaders, his take on effective communication, and how communication is your sword. I hope you enjoy. Artem, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Scott.
Before we jump too far into it, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your career journey, and the exciting stuff that you're working on today?
So there's a lot of information there. I'll try to compress it. So I'm Artem Koren. I'm a co-founder and chief product officer of Sembly AI. Sembly is a company that I co-founded with our CEO Gil McCleff in 2019, and we make an AI teammate, sometimes also known as an AI meeting assistant. My background is originally in technology and technology management. I spent a number of years in management consulting, and there I was doing kind of a mix of product management and management consulting. And I spent a few years in EY. And so I have a kind of a mix of technology, management consulting, and product as my background. And I've dabbled with AI all along the way. And in 2019, we like to say that we started an AI product before AI was cool. So now AI is cool. Everybody's over it. OpenAI did its thing. ChatGPT was a breakthrough product, and so now everyone is very interested. But for several years there, people weren't so interested, and we had to do a lot of kind of uphill awareness spreading about what AI tech is and what it can do for companies.
Yeah, AI has been around for quite some while. A lot of people, most people probably interacted with it or saw it or is impacting their life in one way or the other and just didn't notice it from the very simple of, and I don't want to oversimplify, but just general things like with the Amazon and the Netflix recommendations, things like that. This person like this, you might like this. But yeah, as you mentioned, right now it's at the very forefront of lots of conversations and in the business world. What brought you to kind of this idea for the AI meeting assistant? Was there something throughout your career or your journey that was like, oh, we got to fix this? Or kind of what brought it to use it for meetings?
As a management consultant, I was often the lead for projects, and these could be engagements for Fortune 500, 2,000 companies that had 50 people on them. Some projects had a few hundred people on them. Some projects had a few thousand people on them. And the layer of management of such efforts, these efforts could last for months and sometimes years, that layer of management lives and breathes meetings. So this your program is in a big part around communication. Communication is the work. For some people, the work is maybe writing some stuff, creating code, creating product, creating tech, creating marketing, art, creative material. There's the product of management is meetings, and meetings is creates artifacts of decisions, a common understanding, and follow-on activity. Those are, I'm simplifying, but those are some of the major ones. And spending so much time in meetings, one thing that I realized, this is when I already left UI, is that at the time, there was a lot of technology to facilitate how you conduct a meeting. So Zoom was already there, Google Meet was there. And so there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of tech to help you have a meeting with remote workers, et cetera. But there was really no technology at the time that could do something with the content of the meeting itself. And so in some sense, the idea was very simple. And the simple idea was that if you could have technology understand the actual interaction in a meeting, there's a lot of value that could be gained from that. And that's where the idea for Sembly was born.
Fantastic. I know for lots of people, they spend their day back to back to back in meetings. They're oftentimes the bane of their existence. Some are productive, some are not productive. But yeah, if you think of people that are in meetings, and especially if you're in a meeting on a high stakes project, to be able to have a tool that can effectively, recap it, pull out key points, give you the timestamps, all the different things that Sembly can do, it just increases and boosts your productivity, and then ultimately kind of continues to keep those projects moving forward and hopefully keep them on track. So fantastic work, and it's always cool to hear where these new businesses come out of kind of past experiences, right? You spent all this time in meetings and figure, okay, yeah, there's all kinds of platforms to run them, but how do we really focus in on the content? One of the things, Artem, that you hit on is really around communication. Communication, you mentioned, is the work, and it's plays such a big part in our daily lives, whether it's at home or in our work, in our meetings. And I would imagine throughout your career of being in management consulting and then also co-founding a company, you've ran into some really great communicators. So from your perspective, when you hear that somebody is a really strong communicator, what's the image that comes into mind for you?
So I have a way that I think about communication. I don't know if it gels with what the gurus or whatever think, but I have a way that I think about communication, and specifically effective communication. And to me, communication is all about replicating a thought that you have in your mind in someone else's mind. That, and period, and nothing less, nothing more. And so that's communication. And effective communication is how precisely and how efficiently can you do that with your audience. And so that's effective communication. So to me, an effective communicator is someone who can conjure a very nuanced concept in another person's mind through communication. And that concept doesn't have to be an object. It could be a perspective. It could be an opinion. It could be a guidance. It could be a emotion. So there's many kinds of concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Anything falls in our language could be a concept potentially. And so transferring that concept over through effective speech is a skill. And it's an interesting skill because it's necessarily a bilateral skill. It's not something, how to effectively communicate to a 5-year-old is not the same as how to effectively communicate to an adult. And how to effectively communicate in a one-on-one is not the same as how to effectively communicate
Mm-hmm.
in a town hall. And so it's this very contextually impacted, participant impacted exercise.
I think you hit it spot on there, right? That's effective communication is when you can, in essence, replicate what's in your mind and get that into someone else's mind. And I think about communication of at the end of it, what ideally do I want somebody to, think, feel, or do at the end of this interaction? And as you mentioned, based on your audience, you're going to tweak that approach. So when I'm communicating with somebody at work, my strategy might be a little bit different to try and get them to change a behavior versus if I'm communicating with my 9 and my 11 and my 14-year-old at home, the strategy might be a little bit different. Sometimes it's kind of funny. They're the same and they both work out. But as you really think about your audience, right, that's how you have to kind of tailor not only the message, but how you convey that message. And for sometimes it's going to be a story. Stories can be very powerful. Other times it's going to be, you have to be very straight to the point. Your tone's going to be different. Your pace, your volume, you're going to tweak just because you know a little bit about that audience, you understand some of their potential objections or concerns, and so you really are tailoring that. And one of the things I found interesting at the very beginning, you mentioned back in 2019, AI wasn't all the rage, right? So you had some uphill battles and had to do some selling. So I'm sure a lot of those communication skills came into play there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think communication skills is one of those things that it's such a relevant skill in any situation in business and work that it always, if you have honed your communication skill and style, it's something that's going to be adding benefit to you at every step along the way. And that could be to entice or convince a potential customer, to attract talent to your company, to retain that talent in your company, to negotiate some kind of resource cost for things that you're using, dealing with difficult situations in management, and on and on and on. It's gonna play a role. So yeah, I think it's almost, what, think about it, and a good way to think about it is, and I think maybe my perspective is slanted, but I think especially someone who has any kind of managerial responsibility, it doesn't have to be a full-on manager. Of course, for a full-on manager, that's very much the case. But anyone with some managerial responsibility, communication is your sword. And if you have effective communication, you have a sharp, big sword. And if you don't have good communication skills, you have a dull little sword. and that's and
Yeah,
that's where
that's a
you're.
great analogy. If you think about it, with that sword, right? If you have the sharp sword, that Excalibur type of sword, you could just cut through the noise very quickly with your communication, whether it is through an email, through a one-on-one conversation, a sales pitch, whatever it is, you really can cut through because it allows you to get your message out there in a very clear, compelling, and concise way. And in a world where people are overloaded with information, you can be clear, compelling, and concise. It's going to lead to success. Artem, one of the
Absolutely.
things that you were just chatting about there is being able to use communication skills to attract and retain talent, which is kind of a segue into what I wanted to talk about next. Is from your perspective, right, as you're building a company and I'm sure bringing on talent, what are some of the key communication skills that you really are looking for in people that you're saying these are mission critical in order to be successful in today's workplace?
So the first thing I'll say is that I don't always look for communication skills, and that's part of your. You have to know, for the position that you're hiring, what are the 1, 2, or 3 most important aspects of that person for that position. And communication may not be it. And if it's not, there's no reason to chase it down. It's nice if it's
Mm-hmm.
there, but there's no reason to chase it down. Of course, for anything that's customer facing, partner facing, those kinds of things, you want communication skills for, and they should be good. And also for management positions, you want good, effective communication skills for it. And the kinds of skills, I think that it's the ability, it's really what we said, it's just the ability to express yourself clearly. And the way that I don't have like a special secret question that I ask and like that gets them. No, I actually run my interviews in this very, like, I kind of let the person get very comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and then I kind of let them flow. And that flow, it's almost like opening up their instrument and like they're playing their instrument. And in that instrument, I'm going to start tuning into, like, okay, like how are your communication skills, in addition to all of the other aspects I'm picking up on, like maybe how deep are you technically, how accomplished are you professionally,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but that kind of stuff. But communication skills will be one of the things I suss out as they begin to flow and kind of tell me things, and the mode by which they tell me things, how they describe things, which words they choose, how they pay attention to grammar, what kind of questions they ask. Do they ask questions? Those are all kind of communication style indicators that help me to figure out, can this person communicate well?
Once again, love the analogies that you're using there with, like, the instrument and kind of tuning in on things. I like this idea of, when you're going through interviews, really trying to make it a comfortable situation, because I think most people can hold it together to get through a very kind of scripted, okay, I'm anticipating that Artem's going to ask me this. I can put together a response to this, and they can kind of get through it and somewhat fake it, so to speak, or come off and sound intelligent or very knowledgeable about a topic. But when you kind of bring it down a little bit, open it up, try and make it much more comfortable in a conversational type of aspect, that's when you mentioned you really get to know the person and you're going to be able to see how they communicate. Do they use stories? Do they just ramble on and you have trouble following them? Are they all over the place and scattered? Then you're able to think about, okay, what's it going to be like working with this person? Or if I were on their team, what would it be like working for them as a leader if they can't get a single point across without going off in 30 different tangents? And for some roles that might work, maybe creative type roles where it is good to be able to have that flow and just kind of the association going out. But yeah, it is. Like I said, when you get people to be comfortable, let them open up. I think you through experience, if you know what you're looking for and what's ideal for that role, can really hone in on, okay, this person's going to have the right skills or is going to fit well with the team, or I feel confident and comfortable putting them in front of a client, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of like my kind of personal, I guess, trade like secret, or it's not a secret, but just my approach is what you said is very important, is that you try to understand, how will it be working with the person? And for that, you have the tough challenge of unlocking them as a human being in like a half an hour to an hour conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be tough. And so like cracking that nut is the most important thing, because you want to see how do they handle themselves and how do they speak, and like what they think about,
Mm-hmm.
just as a normal person, not as like, I'm here to interview for position X and I'm going to give you that, like that applicant persona. That's not, I don't want to, because I'm not going to be working with the applicant, I'm going to be working with you. So I
Yep.
want to get to who you really are.
Spot on. Artem, as you think about your career journey and the success that you've had, if you had to boil it down and say, this is the key communication skill that has really helped me get to where I am today. Obviously, there's a lot of skills out there, hard skills, soft skills. But if you had to say, okay, this is a communication skill that has really helped me get to the point to where I am today, what would you say that is?
It's hard to pick out one. I think one of my strong aspects is my ability to explain. I tend to have good um, explanatory skills, if that's a thing. Um, which is, and the reason that's important is you're often. So I spent a big part of my career in like some intersection of like technology and non-technology, and that's always challenging because you're almost like into worlds of different languages,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to break down technical ideas into things that only capture the most important things that are relevant in the context of the business. That's a particular challenge, and that's an explanatory challenge. So whenever you're explaining something, you're taking something complex and you're kind of piecing it together for the other person in less complicated parts that other person can consume. And ultimately, when they consume all the parts, the hope is that they get the big picture. And so that's kind of the essence of explanation. And when you're working between tech and non-tech, you're doing that constantly, because there's things in tech that non-tech people don't know and shouldn't know. But then there's aspects of that are very important for the business
Mm-hmm.
side to understand. And so if you can explain away like complex architectural trade-offs, or other like aspects of like tech decisions in a way that makes sense to the executives, you're going to have a lot more success in that kind of environment. I remember this is a long time, this is one of my first tech jobs, and I was managing a team, and the CEO was anti-tech, like, I mean, like did not wouldn't know how to send an email, like that kind of, this early 2000s, that still existed. And I had to explain to the CEO why we need to do like this huge investment into rewriting this was a Forex trading platform from the inside out, because the way the platform was built was monolithic. And as we got new users, it started to give way and break down. And, and to a non-technical person, it's like, oh, it's broken, so you should fix it. But the way I had to explain it, and I remember it to this day, I was explaining that, the platform is built like one big truck, but what we need is more like a train where we can like attach wagons. And then I said, but really what we need is like a train, but like with a rocket in the front. this is, and this was my way of trying to convey like really complicated architectural ideas in tech to a person who has no concept of tech, but it comes in handy. Yeah.
I love it. Once again, the use of stories and analogies are so powerful in communication. And I think especially in the technical world. One of the things that you said that jumped out to me was there's a lot of technical things that non-technical people, they don't need to know. And from a communication standpoint, it's challenging to know where's that line. Okay, how much do I need to share of the technical stuff to get them to get the point versus they don't need to know it. It's honestly going to be detrimental if I share all this because it's going to confuse them. It's going to lead to a lot more questions and slow things down. So as you say, as I'm able to simplify things and then create some sort of visualization, right? With a semi truck, you can only get so much going down that lane at one time. Maybe you can put a second trailer on it, which always freaks me out when I see those on the highway, those big trucks pulling a second trailer. But yeah, then kind of say, okay, no, we need the train and we need the bullet train, or so to speak. But no, that's a great way to be able to take imagery and help make people understand your point. Love it. Artem, who has been someone from throughout your career that has helped to influence your communication style, right? You mentioned, good at explaining things. Throughout our conversation, you've pulled in different stories and different analogies. Who's been someone that's maybe influenced that style?
I've had some good leaders that I've worked with both at client and in the consulting company. There were a few partners who were very sharp and could really kind of communicate out exactly what's going on. But I think that it began much earlier for me. I'm not sure exactly where, but I think through just like reading, I would pay attention to the like when especially explanatory stuff. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
always really interested in like kind of documentary type things, and good documentaries are really good at explaining stuff well, and I enjoyed that. And I think on some subconscious level, I would pick up those patterns of explanation and how to
Mm-hmm.
clearly voice what you're saying. And then I think oddly, the standardized exams kind of sharpened that, because both on the SAT and even more so on the GMAT, you have to you get punished for not thinking very clearly and sharply.
Mm-hmm.
There's even like a grammatical portion of the GMAT, and it tests your ability to spot very nuanced lacks of clarity, like not even like glaring ones, but very nuanced ones. So it makes you really zoom in and really understand, okay, like this little bit could be considered ambiguous in some
Mm-hmm.
context. And I think that combination of just reading and like studying hard for standardized exams, as sad as that sounds, um, really really honed my verbal sharpness, and of course, people along the way helped as well.
Very cool. I will say that's the first time that standardized exams has come up as an answer to that question, and possibly even reading too. And I will say the reading is massive. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, reading is one of the best things that you can do for it. One, from a purely grammatical standpoint, it's very easy to start to pick up on how to use proper structure and the grammar and things like that. But beyond that, just how to effectively get your message across, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that's going to incorporate stories, there's going to be analogies, and it's going to teach you kind of how to structure things to keep your audience engaged. I know I love hearing that. Artem, as we are wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have for the folks listening to this around just the importance of developing the skills that we talked about today?
The audience, if they're interested in communication skills, they're in for a treat because AI is a big phase transition that we're going through right now, and it's going to upend a lot of how things work in your daily lives, in your professional lives. It's really going to have a huge impact across the board in medicine, and therefore in longevity, in quality of life, in what kinds of jobs become important. But one of big shifts that's I predict, or in my opinion, let's say will happen, is that communication skills will become probably the most important skill for most jobs, where they were important for some jobs, but maybe not the most important, like equally important as other thing. It's going to become the most important thing for most jobs. And the reason I say this is because uh, AI will continue to become more and more powerful and much more quickly than we expect. And therefore, the most productive, the most impactful things that you can do are to engage effectively with AI to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And engaging effectively with AI means communicating. Before modern large language models, effectively engaging to be productive meant effective use of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so you multiply your effort if you know tech well, whether that's tech tools or actual code. But how you use technology would often dictate how much of a multiple impact you can have from the work you do. Does that make sense? Is that
Mm-hmm.
clear?
Yep.
Like if you think about tech as just a multiplier of your effort, right? And so you had to know how to use tech. We're entering a world where it's no longer about how to use tech. It's about, can you conjure in I'm using air quotes now, in the mind's eye of the artificial intelligence, the concept that you have.
Mm-hmm.
If you can effectively communicate to the AI what you need done, whether it be, I need to write this essay for my homework, or I need to write this piece of software, or I need to design a new car, or I need to order tickets to this concert that are hard to find. Like all of these things now are a matter of communicating that well to an AI that will then go and do it for you. And if you communicate effectively, it will get done right. If you don't communicate effectively, just like with a human being, you'll get what you communicate. If you're not very clear and the person's not very clear what you need done, they're going to come back with something that will surprise you instead of delight you. So communication is becoming ever more important in this new age that we're entering.
Oh, that's fascinating to hear because you hear a lot about people are worried about that, technology is going to take over. People aren't going to be doing anything. But I agree that, the input is absolutely going to impact the output. And so if you can clearly get that message across, and I've seen this just from, my use of AI and trying to accomplish something at work, when I'm very clear and prescriptive and detailed around what I'm looking for, the output is orders of operation better than if I'm just kind of just pumping something in there very quickly, not thinking about it. So I think, yes, people continue to hone their communication skills. The way they use them may change, and obviously who they're using them with are going to change, but the underlying foundation still needs to be there. Can you get your message across in a very clear, compelling, and concise way in order to achieve the goal that you're looking for, whether it's from a person or from an AI tool?
Exactly.
Perfect. Artem, thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed our conversation. I wish you all the best with Sembly.
Thank you, Scott. Likewise, anybody who's curious to try Sembly is welcome to check out our website, www.sembly.ai. That's SEMBLY.ai. Or if you want to get in touch directly, you can find me on LinkedIn as Artem Koren, ARTEM KOREN.
Perfect. And I will include both of those in the show notes so that people can easily link to them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a good one. Take care. A special thanks again to my guest, Artem Koren. Artem's point about being able to effectively explain things, especially if you're in a technical role, is spot on. Being able to use stories and analogies to translate complex topics is a true differentiator. As we wrap up this episode, remember that the journey of improving communication skills is ongoing. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from conversations with future guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.